All right. So before we start, a few words about the format itself. So I decided to call it pro presentations because basically the whole idea is to give sort of a space, a stage to professionals like Anvar, so that they can share their practical experience on technical topics, on maybe not so technical topics, and to tell us how they approach different problems or job-related problems while working on real projects. Yeah, so that's the whole idea behind this format. And before we start, just a few simple rules, ground rules that will help us get the most out of this session today. And the first one is I'm pretty much sure you guys will have questions. Please save them for later. We're gonna have a Q&A session at the end where you can ask Anvar your questions, note them down. Yeah, save them for later. The second one is about sticking to English. So apart from giving stage to professionals, consider this space as an opportunity to practice your English, your listening skills, and also your productive skills. So make sure your questions are shaped in English. And from time to time, we also be interacting during the whole speech. So while typing in chat, please stick to English. So to say this, English speaking environment. And the last but not least, please keep your microphones off, not to distract the speaker. And as I said, there will be a Q&A session later on. So this is where you will be able to verbalize your questions. So that was the last rule. So these are simple rules. As I said, they will help us to get the most out of this session, to enjoy it, to get some insights, and just to have fun. And this is Anvar Gubaidullin, and he's a Android team lead, and he works at one of the largest marketplaces in Russia. You may have heard of it. It's called Wildberries. And yeah, so hi Anvar, can you please tell us a few words about yourself before you jump into the main point of today's presentation?
Hi everyone. Hi guys. I see familiar faces. Yeah, as Kirill said, I'm Android team lead in at Wildberries Russ. Yeah, at the checkout stream. Yeah, and we work on the card payments, some order confirmation screens. Yeah, that's main part of our work.
Okay, thanks Anvar. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours.
Okay. Do you see guys the picture, the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, I see the chat. Okay, nice. So let's start. Kirill, have you started the recording?
Yeah,
I
I
can
have.
see.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
nice. So again, hello everyone. My name is Anvar. Yeah, I already told who I am. So let's talk about the topic. So today I want to tell you about the screen, a huge screen that has over 100,000 lines of code, and the screen that serves more than 10 product teams, and still the screen loads less than a second. So here's an agenda, and we will start today with what a fat client actually is. That context explains everything. Then we will move on to our screen, what it's look like, and we will show what's under the hood, and then we will move on to the problems of that screen and problems of old architecture. Yeah, and then the main part of my presentation is the specific rules that helped us to fix the problems. And at the end, I will show some results, some numbers. So let's start. And before I start, type in the chat, please. Have you worked with a fat client before? Type 1 if yes, and 0 if no. I see there are different answers in the chat, and many of developers already worked with fat client. So for other ones, still this part will be useful, and this part we just may not understand all of the picture if I will not show you what fat client actually is. So let's move on. And on the screen, on the left part of the screen, we see the architecture of thin client. So it's pretty simple. Our client, our application has banners, and to show it, to display it, it calls banner service and does no more. And banner service goes to geo service, to user service itself. So it's not the application decision. Yeah, and let's see the architecture of fat client. Yeah, the application still show the same banner, the same logic, nothing special, nothing special about the visualization of screen. But we have much difficult picture, because we need to go to one service, to banner service, to user service, and our client doesn't just display the content, it helps decide what to show. And this is core of what that client is. But in terms of our stream, my team, we need to calculate some prices. We show terms of return conditions, delivery dates, all of that calculated in client side. So just imagine you have bug, and to deliver its fix, you need to bring another release to market, to Google Market or some market. So we almost not have server-side fixes. We need to bring new releases and do it fast. But our application not only fat client, it's offline first. So we went further. You can see on the screen, user can go to catalog, then he can go to the product cart, add this cart to the user cart, go to checkout, and finally he can see his order, their order on the order screen. And all of that flow is with zero network connection. Yeah, this is our killer feature, and we're proud of it. Let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of Fat Client. So we have a fast UI response, just because we doesn't need to wait network responses, because we already have so many stored data in cache. Yeah, again, like in a previous slide, we have more capabilities to build offline first application, because we have all of data to combine it and to show on the screen. Yeah, and our business save the money because our backend architecture, backend is much simpler. Yeah, it has fewer failure points. Yeah, it is. So before I show you disadvantages, guys, can you guess? Can you share your experience? What disadvantages of fat client, type in the chat, please. Let's see what we got. I'll wait some time, and I already see some answers like big app size, less flexible, yeah. Big app size, 100%. Yeah, we need to implement same feature, but there is solutions like Kotlin multi-platform. Yeah, so we have this big monolith applications, and we need to maintain it. So let's show the actual picture of the slide. Yeah, and some of you already mentioned these problems, and I mentioned it. Data freshness issues. So we need to keep up to date all of the data. So sales, promotions, some prices. Yeah, I see there's more answers. Yeah, mobile developer is like not just mobile developer. It controls many services on a flat client. Yeah, we have time to market pressure as the example of the previous slide when we need to bring new bug fix. Yeah, and performance issues because we have many of sources and we have to load it fast. Let's move on and let's look at our screen. Here it is, and that's the most complex screen that we own, maybe the most complex screen of the application. And here's more than 10 product themes that work in the same file, in the same screen. You can ask me, what so many teams doing here? Yeah, so let's zoom into one of the block. You see, it has like 10 features. And just you to know, all of the presentation code and the screenshots are simplified for presentation. So I don't show you all the picture, but you can just imagine this is all one component, and many teams face each other on the same screen. So they face merge conflicts, they have reviews problems, and still our screen has to be fast because slow checkout costs real money. And let's move on to the problem and the what to the our old architecture. So this is what our checkout our view model looks like before the refactoring. Yeah, you can see it's huge. Yeah, and as I said, it's simplified. We see some suppressions, we see hundreds of parameters, yeah, and whole file consists of 5,000 lines of code. But at the start, our view model was like this, like Google's guide example view model. It was pretty simple, like maybe 100 lines of code. So on the right, you can see what happened if you apply Google's guide to fat client, to complex client, to fat screens. So it just doesn't work. And one more thing, why we get here is just we followed Google's guide again. We avoided the main layer. Sometimes not. So what we got is that we cannot avoid this structure because it makes our screen, it makes our view model is so complex. So, and I want to ask you guys, do you avoid the main layer or not? Type 0 if not, and okay, type 0 if you avoid it, and type 1 if you not. Yeah, I see most of you doesn't avoid. Yeah, but some of you still avoid it. So there's no, it's not hard rule of Google's guide. So every of you can decide themselves. Let's move on to the rules that helped us to fix the problems. Yeah, we will talk about the reduced dynamic complexity rule, prioritize data loading, and micro features. Let's move again. Let's back again to our checkout view model before the refactoring. Here it is. And on the right, you can see the structure of it. It's pretty simple, so you can see dynamic complexity is much more than structure complexity. What means dynamic complexity? It means that the only view model changes too fast, and you must keep in mind so many things to fix just some small bug. Yeah, and let's move to this part. So we started with this. Then we just decided to separate it to more classes. Consider repository loads data, checkout interactor launches some business logic, and our checkout view model operates only with UI state and maybe some callbacks, nothing else. This approach was good, it worked, but not enough, because still every of this structure, checkout repository, interactor, view model, still has 1,000 lines of code, and it's still complex in terms of the dynamic. So we went further and implemented stakeholders, services, and divided our repository to the 3 ones. I will explain you what stakeholder is. Service is just a domain class that start on the screen on the start of the screen. And let's move on to this part, to the data layer part. And this is next rule.
Sorry, Anvar.
Okay.
Sorry. Can you please enlarge your screen a bit? So you need just to resize your window, and that should enlarge your screen. Yeah, like that. Yeah.
It's okay.
Thank
you. Okay, nice. So on the fat client with many data sources, it's natural to load everything at once. As it showed on the right of the screen, we just call all sources in parallel and wait for all of them, and then we just emit checkout state. So it's clean, it's predictable, and but it's slow for user. In this example, let's consider this source takes 600 milliseconds. So it holds everything. And before I show you our solution, type in the chat, guys. Maybe you have your solution. How will you fix it? I will wait for answers like for 2 minutes, and then I will show you our actual implementation. Yeah, I see update states with distinct awaits. Yeah, good variant, good option. Add promo data layer. Yeah. Show skeleton first. Yeah. I forget to say one thing. One of the business requirements is not to show any of loaders, any of shimmers on the screen, and we have to show the data immediately. Yeah. Some chased data. Yeah, data maybe. I'll wait more 20 seconds, and then I'll show you actual one. Yeah, one more thing, we have all of the sources are cached because we have offline first and our products delivery, but some of sources may not be cached. Like in this example, promos may not be cached. Okay, I see some good ideas in the chat, and I'll show you ours. So we just separated. We just decided to load data in 3 priority tiers: main, additional, and optional. Main data is like arguments of our screen, products, user currency. It's fast to fetch. It always must be in cache. And this data can be showed on the screen immediately. And we have some inputted data to make order, and we put this data to additional info repository. We load this data in additional info repository. Yeah, and after we got this main info, this additional main info, necessary info to make an order, we load optional info like promo banners, some extra order services. It loaded fast, it's not blocking operation, and it can be failed silently. So our screen becomes interactive as soon as main info loaded. Yeah, and I want to say one more thing about this rule is that we isolated main part of our code um, when we load the products and the user, the currency, maybe shipping address. Yeah. So other teams doesn't need change these 2 repositories. So imagine you're a new developer of some team who works on the screen, on the checkout screen. To implement your new feature, you just need to add your data to optional info repository, and it can't affect the screen render time. Yeah. So let's move to the next rule. The next rule is about UI layer. And this is how we represented our screen. We represented it. It's like a single component. Yeah. And this is how our UI state was look like. It complex and just how do you feel, guys, about this checkout UI state with like more 40 more fields? Type in the chat, please. What do you think about this huge data class? So it's long, yeah. It's long, and this is problem. Would you build ever allow for so many static subviews? Yeah, we will do that. I will show you. This is next. Yeah, better to put data in separate classes. Yeah, we still have separate classes, but they registered in one. Yeah, so the problem is every teams adds their fields and touches the same file. They have conflicts, they have reviews problem. The teams face these problems. And our layout was terrible too. It ran. We run many A/B tests. We have complex domain logic. So what if we just make it more simple? Like in top level, we will show you only. We will just mention some blocks. Okay, and this is what about Anatoly told, I think. Yeah, we just decomposed the screen into micro features. So every component has its own representation like micro feature. But what micro feature is micro feature consists of two parts. The stakeholder is just a contract, it's just a interface that has UI state, events, and callbacks, nothing more. And the composable function that takes a modifier, stakeholder, and nothing more. So it's full. It can be extended in this way. And all decisions, which text to show, which variant to render, what A/B tests choose, are made inside the implementation of stakeholder, implementation of that interface. So think about the layout component as a library component. It has no idea why the text shows what it shows. It just renders what is given. So that's just text, string, maybe some icon. Yeah, and there's a typical implementation of stakeholder. It's a typical view model, but it's not necessary to be a view model. It can be just a composed state. Yeah, and this is how the screen of compositions is look like. It looks like. So we just mentioned we want to show shipping block, payment item block, summary, and agreements components. Nothing more. So our layout doesn't know about flags, about business logic. It just makes layout things. And just because our stakeholder is an interface, you can implement different implementations of the same component. Yeah, ours UI state, so how it used to be. Yeah, and it becomes much simpler. So one thing, the rules I mentioned is rules that helped us to fix our problems, and it may be not helpful for you. So be cautious. And I think this rules was helpful just to think about these problems. Yeah, and these problems doesn't exist in isolation. There was more problems, and there is more problems. Yeah, and if any of you interested, you can find me after the talk, and I will discuss with you. And let's move on to the results. So generally we have improvements of our performance as it expected, yeah. And there's a important metric, performance metric is time to full content paint. It means our content, our necessary blocks like shipping block and payments block are loaded. And as soon as it loaded, we check the metric. So you see, it's like almost 4 times growth. So our old screen was much slower. Yeah. And one more thing about the performance. The performance wasn't the only goal. It wasn't the main goal of our refactoring. Prioritization data also changed how we structure it. And when you think about about what you must load first, you rethink what your data models do, and your better data structures mean less work at the render time and the start of the screen. That's all. Thank you guys for your attention. Now I'm ready to answer the questions, and I'll send the links in the chat if you don't want to scan this QRs.
Okay, thank you very much, Anvar, for your informative presentation. It was pretty packed with cool ideas. Well, I'm not a programmer, but I feel like based on the discussion that I saw in the chat, that guys were pretty interested and involved. Thank you very much, guys, for sending your questions, your ideas, and being really active. So it's a Q&A session. And I hope you saved, and I saw some questions in the chat, and it's time to ask them. So let's make it in organized way. If you want to ask Anvar your question or questions, so you can raise your virtual hand. So there's a function, there's a feature in Zoom. You see, like I got this virtual hand. And if you want to do so, please raise your hands, turn on your microphone, turn on your camera. Go ahead, ask your question. Anyone? Or if you're feeling really shy, guys, you can send your questions in the chat. Pavel. Okay, nice. All right, Pavel, we can start with you. Yeah, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay. Uh, well, a couple of things that I kind of noticed. I saw that date formatters were passed to remodel via initializer, and usually they are supposed to be made static on date formatter itself type or whatever. because creating data formatters is a bit expensive, not not too much for modern devices, but still. So maybe recreating them is just not necessary. You can have one static data formatter throughout the app. And well, did you consider that concept, and do you have that kind of problems in Android development? Because I'm looking from iOS point of view development. Okay.
Anvar, we cannot hear you, Anvar, we cannot hear you.
Sorry, guys. Just to get it right, you talking about data formatter in Vimeo?
Yes, exactly. It is well, it's a small thing, but well, not so many code was presented. Well, that is a thing that kind of attracted my attention. So how do you handle them in your app? Do you pass them around? Do you create them on each screen, or each time the screen is created, or do you
Yeah, I
optimize
got
it?
the question. Yeah, we have different approaches to this. We sometimes we create it on the screen, on some screen, and we have our old date formatter. It's application scope singleton, so it it leaves whole cycle of application. Yeah.
I understand. Well, static var is something very similar to a singleton. It is also lazy. It is also created once. Well, if you, at least if you don't rewrite it. Well,
No, we just use usual implementation of date formatter and nothing else.
Okay, I've got the answer. Another thing I've noticed is that you as well pass such types as analytics or some kind of objects to the screen initializer. Do you have some kind of environment concept in Kotlin? Well, because in Kotlin is very similar to Swift, and composable is similar to Swift UI. And instead of using singletons for UI part in iOS, this is a Swift UI thing. There is a concept of environment variables that can be that each view on each level of hierarchy can access and can get updates. Okay, it is a reactive thing. Well, do you have a such complex such concept in Kotlin and for UI things at least?
I think I'm not sure what concept are you talking. You talked about analytics, yeah?
Yes, about it's not about the analytics itself. It's about passing some vars that may change on the fly, and whenever they change, the view must be recomputed and
Yeah, we have
redisplayed.
this flow, we have this reactive things on the Kotlin. It's very popular. Yeah, but and we use it, yeah. And this is one of the hidden rule that we didn't mention in this presentation. We avoid using reactive approach in some cases because it's difficult to debug. It's difficult to understand your code flow So in terms of this dependencies, it just imperative things. Yeah, and it doesn't affect the render, and we have not met this problem.
Understand. So you've managed to go without it just by async
Sometimes
programming.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes we use reactive when the data is really reactive and we expect this data to change on our screen. But sometimes we just pass some data to screen as arguments. Like we do not expect that it can change.
Well, understand. It's very easy to pass some data down the hierarchy if this data never changes. Well, it's the most easy thing we can think of. But
Yeah.
sometimes we have to pass some variable fields, like text fields, for example, that every view should depend on, and not only the presenting view, but also the container view, for example, or some other view which is higher in the hierarchy. And for that things, you have two approaches, two basic approaches. You can pass this variable from top to bottom, and each view has to pass it. Or you can just put it in an environment, which has some analogy to singleton, but it's not. And access it in every subview, several layers down.
Okay, Pavel, thank you very much. Pavel, it seems like you have a lot to discuss, a lot of questions related to
Yes,
I
I
have an
will
idea.
answer.
I have an idea. Look, Anvar, have you sent the link to your Telegram account?
Yeah.
So Pavel, you can find Anvar on Telegram. You can keep discussing, guys, because there's a lot to discuss for sure. Thank you very much for your questions. Yeah, thanks a lot. So let's move on to the next question, Anatoly. So you got one, right?
Yeah. Hello, Anvar. Thank you for the presentation. Just pretty simple question. I'm curious, what do you use to measure performance, screen performance in milliseconds? So how did you get data for these nice charts in the last slide?
Yeah. Thank you for our team. We have many teams in our application, and one of them is performance. So we don't need to know the concrete logic of that measurements, and I don't know them.
Okay.
I just use our solution, our approach to measure. We just like put our can I show the screen? Like if we have, let's say, this, we can just put into another composable function, this function into another composable function, and it automatically will measure all of the metrics.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anatoly, for your question. Thanks. All right, Alex, you just lowered your hands. Probably you don't want to ask your questions anymore, or maybe it's already been asked and answered. So if you still want to ask it, you can re-raise your hand. So I can see Ilya's hand in the air. Ilya, so what's your question?
Yeah, Anvar, thank you very much. Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
Okay, Anvar, thank you very much for your presentation. I have a very simple question. You have mentioned multi-platform solutions, technologies when I have emphasized that fat clients have disadvantage of the thing that you must implement the same feature both on iOS and Android. It is more expensive to business actually, and you have said there's some multi-platform solutions available. Do you use any?
We don't use KMP, Kotlin multi-platform, Compose multi-platform. We have two platforms, iOS, Android, and we maintain two platforms. We have many developers, but still we improving into this question. We making some libraries reusable, and maybe you heard about that product Vibes, like TikTok, but with marketplace capabilities. Yeah, and maybe like months ago, we introduced the checkout flow in this application, and we share the logic between these two applications. Like we have some SDK, and it's on the development right now.
Is it correct that you have some open source technologies, right?
Open source?
Okay, maybe I have misunderstood about Vibes, or this is just a new feature.
We share some
Oh, you share
repositories. What?
You're sharing the code between platforms?
Between two applications, Android applications. And maybe the next step will be Kotlin pure modules without any Android dependencies, and we will share it between different platforms.
Okay, this is actually a nice plan. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Ria. Thank you, Ria, for your question. Thank you very much. All right, Alex, you're back. I guess you had to go to the kitchen for a sandwich, right? So you can ask a question.
Forgive. Yeah, yes. My question is, yes, first of all, thank you for this presentation. Very, very interesting. But Anvar, how long did it take you to complete your refactoring? And how did you convince management that you need to do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and this is a long story. We started our refactoring at 2024, maybe April, and we did it like at the same time as we did product features, product tasks, and maybe we launched the first. We used smooth rollout to get users new screen, and maybe like it passed 1 year to show this story to user. So it was in a dev. We had two versions of screen, and we had some reusable logic between two screens, but old screen hadn't this feature, this rules like new. This is the difference. So the short answer, it takes like 1 year, and it was started in 2024. It was April, as I remember.
What about management?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the main question, I guess.
Yeah, this is so you just need to talk, and we have good management, and this was long story too. And for now, our developers on the other platform has this problem with performance, and we has this problem on some countries that doesn't have this new screen for now, and management wants to see the fast screen because it's costs money, it costs some conversion. So it's just about product metrics. It's not about only technical issues. So we just said that we have some problems, like if user screen loads in a 3 second, he can leave before it loaded. He can just leave and we can lose some money. Yeah, and this is one of the reason that the business can understand.
Yeah. This chart looks very interesting. And can I ask you additional question? Did you convert your refactoring into money or user experience using these charts or maybe other metrics? Because it's just only time before and after. Any other measurements or maybe charts, graphics converted some.
Yeah, when we
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, when we did our rollout of new screen, when we switched to our new screen, we did A/B tests. So we just were afraid of the numbers, of the conversion numbers on some GMV and something else. So we just did A/B test, old screen, new screen, and actual money, actual product metrics doesn't really change. Only thing what changed is performance and user experience of that screen. It become more faster and more maintainable, and we have much less bugs in that screen that we had in previous one.
What about battery drain and some similar metrics?
No, we didn't measure it.
Okay. Got it. Well, thanks for your answers. It's very interesting.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Seems like it's a huge issue for you to persuade your management.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, understand. All right.
That's
So,
common. That's common problem.
yeah. So that's it. So we don't have any more questions left. So again, thank you very much, Anvar, for your informative, insightful presentation. Thank you guys for being involved and sharing your perspective on the issues, on the questions that Anvar unfolded today. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, so it was an experimental one, but it feels like we can carry on running more sessions like that. So how do you feel about that? Can you share some words in the chats or maybe just reaction, something like that? Okay. No, I see a generally very positive reaction. Yeah. So this is all thanks to you, Anwar. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of today's presentation. Thank you very much. Have a nice one. See you next time. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
See you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.